So welcome everyone for the final session of the Data Toboggan Winter Edition 2023. Nice to see you all. And I think this is my first conference post 2023 that I'm presenting. And I'm happy to present a new feature that is currently in preview on Azure Synapse Analytics, which is the Data Explorer pool. I think you would have heard about the SQL pool, you would have heard about the Spark pool in Synapse, but Data Explorer pool, maybe the term Data Explorer can be familiar for a lot of people, but the Data Explorer pool itself is something new that has been introduced into Synapse Analytics. This session is all about the introduction of what is that pool is, how do you go and provision it, and also like what type of data that you can ingest in those pools. I'm Anupama Natarajan. I'm going to be your presenter for this particular session, but I'll talk a little bit about myself towards the end, and we'll straight away get into the topic. So a quick agenda for today's session. So I'm going to introduce you what is this Azure Synapse Data Explorer pool is all about. What are the key capabilities that you get out of this pool? And when do you really use it? Because when you have multiple options, and especially that we get this a lot in Azure, when do you choose what? And that becomes really tricky. And there is a clear a reason when you need to choose the Azure Synapse Data Explorer pool. And we will look into that. And what does this Data Explorer pool architecture looks like? So why do we need to use it? And of course, how this architecture is going to help in scenarios where it can be used. As I said, like the term Data Explorer, you would have been familiar about that before, because this is not a new term that we are hearing about in Azure. But what is the difference between the Azure Data Explorer versus the Synapse Data Explorer? So this can recall some of the things like what is the difference between the ADF Azure Data Factory that is outside as a service, and what is this pipelines, Synapse pipelines. So similarly, we will go and do a comparison between these two. And I'm going to quickly introduce you to this Kusto query language. And I think you had a lot of sessions today on Synapse, and definitely other speakers would have introduced you to Kusto. But if you haven't been, there are some useful links which I have shared in the references section that will help you to get started with the Kusto query language. The reason I'm emphasizing on the Kusto query language is because you need to know that, especially when you are trying to query the data that is sitting in the Synapse Data Explorer. We will also look at some the ways of around how do you go about provisioning. There are multiple ways of provisioning this pool. How do you ingest the data and finally query the data from the Data Explorer pool? So as I said, I have a references part. Like anything that I'm sharing today, there are links that will be available for you to reference in order to read a bit more about the topic. And towards the end, I'm happy to take any questions that are coming along. Cool. So let us get started. So when I talk about Azure Synapse Data Explorer pool, one of the reason we have this pool is in order to query around log data. So telemetry data is almost everywhere. So whether you're talking about applications, whether it is web applications, or if you have talking about servers like infrastructure, related information, or security logs, metrics, time series data, everything is generating everything we find telemetry in there. So where this, what is this telemetry data provides? Like it is providing you information that you can use and analyze it. But the main problem of these telemetry data is that they are large volumes of data. So there was a quite interesting thing that I figured out, when I go and do some sort of consulting to my Azure clients is around a cost optimization. So just going and looking at what do they really use and how much they are using in terms of their services. And it's interesting to note a log analytics always comes at the top. And if I drill down why, and it's because they log a lot of telemetry data. So it's growing more and more, and organizations need that. It's not that they are unnecessarily logging. They need that for various reasons, but probably they can introduce some sort of retention, like for identifying how long some data is required and how long some data can be removed. The point I'm trying to make here is telemetry data is growing and it's almost everywhere in a lot of organizations. So Azure Data Explorer, especially the Synapse Explorer pool, is going to give you that ability to store this telemetry data, and you can really run large queries through this Data Explorer pool to provide near real-time information, which is really important because that's what we are going to look at is when we collect terabytes and petabytes of telemetry data on a daily basis, how do you go about storing them and also like go about query them in order to get the near real-time information. So as you can see here, normally with the Azure Synapse Analytics, you would have had your SQL pool and the Spark pool. Now the Data Explorer pool has been introduced. Just a note on this, this is still in preview mode, and just keep an eye on that. So what are the key capabilities of this Azure or Azure Synapse Data Explorer pool? So the first thing is it can work on any type of data, whether we are talking here about structured, unstructured, or semi-structured data. Basically, it doesn't matter. So it can work on any type of data. It has a powerful distributed query engine, which is really required when we are going to store terabytes and petabytes of data. Like you need a distributed query engine in order to query this data and to retrieve the results. It has an interactive Kusto query language called KQL, and I will talk a little bit about KQL later. But KQL, as you can see, the syntax of that is almost similar to SQL, and but I think the way how you use some of the functions and things there is commonality. There are minor syntax changes that you can see between them. But from functionally, like if you know how to write SQL, you can easily learn how to write queries with KQL. And it has got a lot of powerful JSON parsing capabilities, especially if you're storing data in semi-structured form. You can do a lot of like what do you say, transformations or parsing using the data pool, sorry, Data Explorer pool with the Synapse. And last but not the least is the advanced time series support. It's the normal time series support is supported by a variety of mechanisms, but because we are dealing with telemetry data and time series is an important part within telemetry data, you have really got advanced or best of the breed in terms of the time series support when it comes to the Synapse Data Explorer pool. So why should I use that? Clearly, I mentioned about like it's really good for like querying your telemetry data, storing the telemetry data as well as querying. But any other reasons why we need to go down the Azure Synapse Data Explorer pool? First thing is easy ingestion, so which we will be talking about. There is a capability within the Data Explorer pool where it allows you to do a single click ingestion. So basically, it's like a wizard type of screens where it allows you to specify your source, you specify your destination, and then pretty much the ingestion process straight away starts with that. So you can ingest data from a variety of data sources. That is the main key advantage with the Synapse Data Explorer pool. So whether you are getting real-time data coming through Event Hub or Kafka or Azure Data Lake storage, doesn't matter. You can pull any of this data inside the Synapse Data Explorer pool. There is no complex data modeling involved. So pretty much you go ahead, create a database, create the tables that you require, and then you can start ingesting data into that. No need to maintain index. So you may be wondering like, okay, we talked about it gives you like a high performance, it has a high performance query engine, and which means like already things have been taken care of how to deal with this telemetry data and query them effectively. So you don't need to worry about creating any indexes or maintaining any indexes. And support for data analytics. Purpose for storing log data, especially in the Data Explorer pool, is to get value out of that. So if you want to get value out of that, you need to be able to query the data as well as aggregate the data in or slice and dice the data in the way that you want. That's where the KQL comes into the picture, because the KQL support allows you to simply aggregate the data, and you can visualize the data in the mechanisms that how you want to do that. And also, as I said, it can handle petabyte scale of volumes, and it's well integrated. So the good thing about the Synapse Data Explorer pool is like it can transfer data between Data Explorer, Apache Spark, and integrate with the other SQL engines also. So all these features that easily make why we need to go down the path of the Azure Synapse Data Explorer pools. I'll talk about the fundamental differences between is there any, what are the key differences between the Data Explorer versus the Data Explorer that we have in the Synapse? So before we go down and look at those differences, I want to just highlight one part, which is around when to use the Azure Synapse Data Explorer pool. So because there we have a SQL pool, we have got the like a Spark pool, and this is an addition to that, but there should be a reason where you can use this. The first thing I would say is that this platform has been mainly developed for analyzing near real-time log analytics or IoT analytics solutions. So if you are looking at consolidating or correlating your log information or events data, irrespective of whether it is an on-premises or cloud or even with a third-party data sources, then Synapse Data Explorer pool is your way to go. If you want to accelerate your AI journey in your organization, which can be like anomaly detection or forecasting or pattern recognition, then your Data Explorer pool is your way to go. There is a lot of organizations who spend a lot of money on infrastructure-based log analytics solutions. Like you have got the Elasticsearch, the Splunk, and these tools are there. So if you are looking at replacing them so that you can do cost savings and increase productivity, then Synapse Data Explorer pool is your way to go. Don't come and tell me like I moved everything to Azure and I expected it is to be cheap. As I said, like a lot of organizations are storing telemetry data, but you need to be clear on what is the data that you want to store. If you don't like pay attention to that, then if you just do use it as a dump, then there is no in terms of cost savings or increased productivity. It's always like you have to do your work in terms of what is the telemetry data that you really require that needs to be stored on Azure. And definitely, if you focus on those areas and understand the retention policies, there is a way you can do cost savings. And if you want to do IoT-based solutions and IoT-based analytics, then probably the Data Explorer pool is your way to go. Last but not the least, it is also supported for building analytics SaaS solutions for various of your customers you have got. So if you are a SaaS provider and if you're thinking about building analytics, again, when it comes to like the data that you want to store and build analytics over that, Data Explorer is your way to go. So we saw a variety of scenarios where Data Explorer pool will be handy. And quickly, let us look at the architecture of the Data Explorer pool. So if you take the Data Explorer pool, so it takes the same like architecture of Synapse where you have the compute and the storage resources, they are segregated. Okay, so you have your Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, where again you can store any format of the files information that you want to store in there. You also can pull data from a variety of sources here. So as you can see from Data Factory, the IoT Hub, Event Hub, here you can get near real-time information. And also like you can pull data from any of these data sources. And we will see that when we do the ingestion process, like how do you connect to them and get the data. So then you have got the data management and the engine in here, which is actually going to you be used in the process of ingesting your data. And then pretty much it will be available for you to start querying in there. So typically your Data Explorer pool, if you look at it, you go on provision and then pretty much create a database and whatever tables that you want, ingest your data into those tables using the wizard process or one-click ingestion process. And finally, once the data is ingested, it's available for you to run your queries using Kusto. So as simple as such, but the thing is that the good thing about the architecture is the engine that we are using here. It's really powerful, and it can handle. This is the engine that can handle or query petabytes worth of data, and it can present you. So that is the key advantage of using the data explorer pool inside Synapse. So just a brief introduction about Kusto. Like, I'm not going to spend the whole session talking about Kusto query language in here, but I'll want to just highlight how simple it is for you to get to learn about Kusto query language. Uh, this is the language that you can use to query the data that is sitting in the Data Explorer pools. And it can query both structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data. Uh, this is an example of a Kusto query. I thought like this would be really easy to explain rather than trying to making you to imagine. So if you look at it here, the first one, the Strom events, is basically the table name. So the table from where I want to do the query. And then typically you have the where clause where it is saying, okay, the condition saying where the start time should be greater than 2007 February 1st, and the start time should be less than 2007 March. So basically for the month of February 2007, we are going to look at some of the storm events that has happened, and also with the event type of flood and for the state of California. So as simple as that. So you can see here, and each of these line is separated with a Python symbol, and that is showcasing like, okay, so these are the new conditions that you are looking at. And project is nothing but saying like, okay, from this table, I want these columns need to be outputted. So these are the output columns that you want to see in your output. Again, based on the filter condition that has applied. So basically, the storm events for the month of February in 2007, where the event type is flood and the state is California. So as you can see here, it is pretty much mimicking to a certain extent of your SQL. And that's why I said, like, if you know SQL, it's quite easy for you to transition. So I'll just quickly share some of the links also in terms of how you can quickly get up to speed with the Kusto query language. Just give me a sec. So this is available in the references section of the slide pack. And as you can see here, there is a section or a URL where I have outlined here what is the difference between a SQL query and the Kusto query. So if I have a query here, how do I write this? A simple example is, let me quickly zoom this. So you have select asterisk from a table name. So that's what you do in SQL. But in Kusto, you just provide the table name. And in our example that we saw on the slide, it was like just calling as from events. So that is going to just bring in all the content from that particular table. And so then you can see like how you evaluate null, what are the comparison operators when it comes to between SQL and Kusto query language. And some of the common things that you can do, which is your group by, order by, capability, nested queries, they all can be done in Kusto queries also. So if you're a SQL person and you want to just use your knowledge of SQL, but also parallelly learn about Kusto, this URL is your best way to go with. And if you're a new starter of Kusto query language, again, I wouldn't panic because I was a new starter too when I was trying to learn about Kusto query language, because I had to work on a lot of the log analytics, like logging data, which I had for my client, and pretty much I had to go with that. So you can just start learning it. And again, these URLs are also available in the references. So here, simple things like how do I get some 5 random rows from the table? You can go ahead and do that. How do I do sort by and order by, whether it's ascending, descending, doesn't matter. That is also available. So as I said, if you just start using, practicing this, the syntax of that is almost familiar with SQL. So I wouldn't be panicking around like, oh, is this again a new thing, that query language that I have to learn about? Really quick and easy you can learn, and especially if you are coming from a T-SQL background. So that's your Kusto query language. And to query the tables that are available in the Synapse Data Explorer pools, you pretty much use the Kusto query language. Cool. I think the first thing we will look at how do we go about and create a Data Explorer pool using the Azure portal. Because as I said, Data Explorer pool is part of your Azure Synapse Analytics, one question can come in your mind is, first thing is like, do I need to create an Azure Synapse Analytics service? Yes, that is important because the pool is actually you provision within that. So you go ahead and provision the Azure Synapse Analytics first. And then the next thing is like how there are many ways how do you go and provision a Data Explorer pool in that. So let me quickly pull through my Azure portal here. Good. Zoom this a bit. So I have got a Synapse workspace that I have already created for this demo purposes, and I have just clicked on it. So there are multiple ways that you can create the Explorer pool, similar to how you do that with your SQL or Spark pool. So here I have got the new Data Explorer pool that is available that I can create. Note it down, it's still in preview. So you can click on here and you can go ahead and provide what is your pool name that you want and also the workload. So it's quite interesting to see the workload is typically like the VM size that you need to select. And also like you can just go and figure out which VM size is going to be appropriate for you to choose. And there are two types. You have got whether it's a storage optimized pool that you want to create or a compute optimized. So once you provide that information, and there isn't much specific, yeah, this is more around the scaling process. Whether you want to go ahead and implement manual scaling or whether you want to go ahead and implement an auto scaling. So for this demo purposes, like we will keep it as like a manual scale, so which I have already provisioned, but I'm just showcasing to you if you are going ahead and provisioning a Data Explorer pool, you can go ahead and do this. So that's one way, right, of provisioning the Data Explorer pool. But there is another way how you can provision it also, which is by opening up your Synapse Studio. So let us quickly open up our Synapse Studio. And from Synapse Studio, you will be able to still provision your Data Explorer pool. So you can go ahead and you can say manage. And then underneath here, so this is the same thing. So this is not only for your SQL pool and Apache Spark pool, even for the Data Explorer pool, you can go ahead and create your new pool from here. Same specification like what you saw from the portal itself without getting into the Synapse Studio. So same thing, all the settings are going to be the same. So you provide a pool name, the workload, and pretty much you can specify whether you want to do an auto scale or not. And then you can just go ahead and create it. So I got a pool that has been already created. And as you can see, I have a separate query endpoint. So if I want to just programmatically just issue a query, and then I want to retrieve it, I have an endpoint which I can query with my like Data Explorer pool, or I have a data ingestion endpoint. So if I have to programmatically ingest data in here, I'll be able to go ahead and do that. So this is multiple ways of how you go about like putting or introducing your pool inside the Data Explorer pool inside Synapse. So the next step is all about once you have got the pool created, you have to create the database. So if I go back here, so when you create a new pool, right, so you will be able to have an option to do that. So let me try and do that. So why can't we say Synapse 2023 and I'll say compute optimized. We'll take a small one, and of course we'll do a manual scale, and let us go ahead and create it. Because I have already created the database, so I just wanted to quickly show you like, okay, where did I go and create the database so you can see that. But in the meantime, so here you can see this is the DemoDB database that I have created. And I have got some tables and things available in here. The another cool thing is you can open this in the Data Explorer also. So you're already in Synapse Studio, but you can open this in Data Explorer, which means it can run some cool tools and things. And also like you can just go ahead and create tables quite easily in here. So let me quickly check. Okay, this is still creating. Okay, let us start with this one. So suppose if I have to create a new tables in here, I can just go ahead and create a table. So here I have got one table which has got a list of columns which I wanted to store and query. And the other thing you can also do in here is, let me quickly showcase this. You can create a notebook. So whether you want to create a notebook to load the data, or you can create a new KQL script, and you can just go ahead and write your KQL queries over this particular table. I don't have anything right now, but I have a sample table which I can show you. So as you can see, the intelligence is bringing in the table. So if I don't have any way condition or anything, and as I said, haven't got much data loaded in here. But if I go at home through here, and I can explore some sample data. Cool. So this is, as you can see here, this is your KQL query. And so I can say like I want to just, you can just, if you want to query in a T-SQL way, you can do that. But if you're more interested in the KQL also, you can just go ahead and query that in KQL. As you can see, what is the total count? And okay, so if you want to just say like explain. Yeah, so that is going to just go and explain it. So if you do prefix your SQL query with an explain operator, it will convert it to KQL for you, which is another handy thing that is for you to know. Because if you are, as I said, SQL person, and if you want to just, I know how to write it in SQL to query this data, but I want to turn this into KQL, just prefix that with explain and you will be able to get that. So as you can see here, there is already some samples that you can go and play around with the Data Explorer, which will allow you to do that. And of course, like I'm using the word Data Explorer and Data Explorer pool like interchangeably, right? So don't worry about that. I have a slide specifically to showcase about what are the differences between them and what are the similarities between them. So that's a simple example, so as you can see. And also like if you are just having metrics data, because when we talk about logs, right, you will have metrics as well as like logs. So you can use the Data Explorer pool to query any of those, whether it's metrics or log data. Another thing I want to show before we jump on that is some of the sample dashboards. So this. So you can build some dashboards using those queries that we have got, and then you can just showcase it in here. Like, so these are some dashboards that you can see how much the data that has been captured within the Data Explorer, and you will get some ideas around that. In terms of the KQL query, sometimes you can just show that output of that inside as a text, or if you're aggregating them, you can also showcase as some charts that you are seeing. So that's already available as part of like querying your log data. So long story short, like this Data Explorer pool is mainly used to bring in large volumes of your telemetry data or IoT data that you have got, and you can just go ahead and use it to query them. So I think by now, yeah, it's still creating. Maybe probably let it come and then we can look at it. So just to quickly show you the process, once you provision your Data Explorer pool, like how do you go about and create the database and subsequently the tables associated with that. The other part I wanted to quickly show before we move on to our slides is, so if I have my data, maybe, so this is when I use this is your Synapse Studio and this is the Data Explorer. You can query them in either way. So the other thing I wanted to show is, suppose if you have a table and you want to just go ahead and say like, oh, I want to just get some data out of this table. So you can always do that quite easily. So let me check this. Okay, so the workspace is there. We will go to develop and let me close these ones. Okay, let me get in here. So what I'll do is I'll quickly, okay, so here's the ingest data. So I will go to quickly click on ingest data, or the other way you can get in also, sorry. If I go here, go to data, that's one way of doing the data management. Or if I go and look at, I think I can look at my cluster here. 1 second. So this is creating. Okay, we'll come to this later. And so let me quickly go back to home. Yeah, there is another way. Okay, so this ingest is mainly for your Synapse. So I would say go into the Data Explorer and you go into Home. And there is under Data, you can do an ingest table. And this is another way of creating the table also. So if you want to create a new table, you can go ahead and do here, or you can do ingest data. But if you look at it, you may be in Data Explorer, but this Data Explorer is integrated with your Synapse. So what you can see is you can see the cluster where what you have created, which is the Data Explorer pool cluster that you created within Synapse, and the list of databases that you have got. And this is another way you can go ahead and create a new table. So either you can go and create the table upfront in the using your query language in here. So let me get back to this. Yeah, so whether you want to just go ahead and do that, you can actually run a KQL, or can do it via the notebook if you need, or you can have this with a graphical user interface. You want to create a new table. So maybe we'll say, I would say new table and click on next. So these are the type of data that you can import. So whether you have the file sitting in a blob, or a file, or it is like a flat file, or a blob container which has got a lot of files sitting in there, or a ADLS Gen2, which is data lake storage Gen2 container, or Event Hub, or even Amazon S3, doesn't matter. So quite interesting is I have an Event Hub already. So can choose Event Hub, and this is going to scan through my subscription of the Event Hub, what I have got. So I have the Event Hub namespace, the Event Hub that I have created, and that is going to create a data connection name for me. And I have got a consumer group. So these are all part of the Event Hub. Normally you use Event Hub in order to get the real-time events flowing through. Event Hub is capable of capturing more than millions of events per second. So you will be able to just get as the events hub or are receiving those events, your Data Explorer pool can pretty much ingest those events. So that's what we are creating in here. So if you look at here, some like IoT sensors or something generates events that gets pushed into your Event Hub. The Event Hub is now hooked up with this mechanism. We are hooking it up with the Synapse Data Explorer pool. These events are going to be stored in the Data Explorer pool, which will allow you to further do any sort of analysis or querying using the data. So in terms of schema, so currently my Event Hub doesn't have any data, but we have a schema that is available within the table in here. So if I look at my demo table, the Storm events table, so this is the schema. So the assumption is that we will be getting the event. So not all the columns. So whatever the columns that are required, the event is going to provide that information so that it can be fed into these columns. So currently it may complain saying like, okay, there wasn't any data form. So what you can do is you can start ingesting data through your Event Hub, and then pretty much the schema will be mapped in here. And then the data can be of any format. So as you can see, this is the data you're getting, which can be ingested in any format in as shown in here. So I think the other one got created, or still, let me refresh a bit. Yeah, it's still creating. But that's fine. So the point here is the ingestion of the data is pretty straightforward. The last part is around monitoring your pools. So when you look at the Synapse, you have SQL pools and Spark pools. How you can typically monitor those pools, you will be able to monitor your Data Explorer pools also. So in terms of like how many instances is running and like how much CPU utilization you have got, ingestion utilization in the last 15 minutes, any query results that you have executed and ran, and how does your ingestion results look like? So pretty much, as you can see here, all those information in terms of monitoring and logging is available. So there may be some enhancement that may come through in that space, in this space, especially once it becomes GA. But for right now, I think even as a preview service, I would say it is nice and functional, and it delivers like what you expect to deliver from a typical like a log aggregator process. We quickly show you the differences between. So I want to just quickly talk through the differences between the Azure Synapse Data Explorer pool versus the Azure Data Explorer. So here I have just briefly shown some of the key ones I have noticed, but I will just pull through a URL for you so we can go through that in detail. Just bear with me for a sec. So basically, this is going to fundamentally tell you the differences that you have got. So one of the key reason that we have got the difference between Data Explorer pool and the Data Explorer is the Data Explorer pool is well integrated with your Synapse Analytics workspace. So that's the advantage. So if you look at it like why previously before we had Synapse, like we had other things like Data Factory, then you had Power BI, of course, and then we had SQL Data Warehouse, and then of course like we had Databricks and things. So it's not that we didn't have any of these things, but what Synapse gave us is like a one-stop shop. So if you are planning to do end-to-end analytics, I don't need to worry about going and figuring out what services in Azure I should be using. So this is the Synapse Studio gives you like a one-stop shop where you go. Do you want to ingest the data? Do you want to like do the what do you say, like a visualization of the data? Do you want to do machine learning? So everything is like encompassed within the Synapse Studio itself. Same thing with the Data Explorer pool. So the difference between I can use Azure Data Explorer as a standalone, but if I want to integrate that with the capabilities of my end-to-end analytics, then probably I'll be using the Data Explorer pool within Synapse to do that. So in terms of, if you look at the comparison between the Synapse Data Explorer versus the Azure Data Explorer, you don't see a lot of differences like the feature is in here, but not in here, apart from one or two as we go along here. So if you look at from a security perspective, pretty much it supports VNet, a private Azure Private Link, and from a firewall perspective, because this with the Synapse one, it automatically integrated from or inherited from the workspace. So here we don't have that capability available now. And business continuity, like availability zones, they are available. But it is optional in the Data Explorer, while it is like by default, it is enabled in the Synapse Data Explorer. And similarly, integrations wise, it supports a variety of integrations from where you can ingest the data. I won't be going in detail, but this link is again available in the references section. If you look at the things that it doesn't support, like one of the things I personally like is because when you are working with Data Explorer queries, like you'll be writing a lot of custom queries, and you need an ability to just treat them as a source code, and you want to have a source control mechanism on that. Data Explorer doesn't support that, while you can save your KQL queries and you can integrate that with a Git as part of the Data Explorer pool, which is a really great advantage why you can use that. And also just because of this feature, you don't need to like put Synapse or just install like Synapse Studio or provision Synapse Analytics for that. If your real thing is around, I want to do end-to-end analytics and I'm dealing with lots of telemetry data and I want to do near real-time analytics, then Synapse is your way to go. Or if you're just you want to have to hold log data and you want to do analytics over that, but it is not you don't need it to be integrated to do end-to-end analytics, then you can still keep that in Azure Data Explorer. Apart from a couple of things that like, okay, KQL, putting it into your source control, you have to manage that independently. While with Synapse Studio, it comes as well integrated with Git. So, but other than that, in terms of KQL queries, any APIs or SDKs that you want to integrate to push the data or query the data using those endpoints that we saw, or the connectors capability that is available between the normal Azure Data Explorer versus the one integrated with Synapse, they are the same. Because underlying it is the same engine, but I think there are some enhancements like you get in Synapse because it is bundled as part of the Synapse, Azure Synapse Analytics. And the reserved instances, this is supported in here, which makes sense, but here it is more around, again, it is part of the Synapse family, so it is all encompassed in that. So you don't have a separate reserved instances that you can allocate with the Azure Synapse Studio. So these are the key differences. So I would say like the main reason why you go between, or when do you choose between Data Explorer or the Synapse Data Explorer is, am I looking for a single unified solution like end-to-end for my like analytics for my IoT data or my telemetry data? Then Synapse Data Explorer is your way to go. Or am I going to just to do like an ad hoc, like just get the data, do some queries over then, which a lot of like organizations do. And a couple of my clients also just they want to ingest that log data, more curious to see what type of security vulnerabilities or events that are being captured. So they are more interested to just query that in order to just get some analytics out of the data, then sometimes you don't need a full-fledged Synapse Analytics to do that. So you can make that like a decision on which particular service that you want to go with. But if you already have provisioned Synapse Analytics in your organization for your end-to-end data warehousing purposes, then it's a no-brainer that you go and just provision another pool, which is your Data Explorer pool, and start utilizing the capability that gets within, say, the Synapse Analytics itself. So I was pretty excited when I saw that, because I saw like the Data Explorer is like a standalone analytic tool which is sitting there, and it's a good thinking around like, okay, integrating all the analytics inside this one stock shop. So, and also it's easy for us to, when we talk to our customers, to say, if you are planning to do any sort of analytics and what is the service that you look for on Azure, is quite easy for us to explain Synapse Analytics. One of the challenge I normally see with Azure is the few services which does the same thing. And how do you put that in front of your clients and try to just explain it to them? And I would say that's where I think you need to go with. And by now, with all these sessions and all this, I think you would have easily tried to explain like what is the difference between Azure Data Factory versus like Synapse pipelines, and when do you go with what? Same thing with this. Like you can go with the standalone one, especially like if you are just doing low-level analytics, as I said. But if you are doing well-integrated analytics and you have already got an enterprise data warehouse, then your Synapse Data Explorer is your way to go. So just getting back onto our slides. So some of the key references that I told you, like you can go ahead and learn about Data Explorer pools, as well as like the Kusto query language, and also the KQL syntax, and how do you like convert between SQL to KQL or upskill your knowledge with that. Watch this space. This is really early stages in terms of the Data Explorer, but even in what its early stages, it's quite functional, and you can just go ahead and play around with that. Let me quickly check the one which I provisioned. Has it been provisioned? Yeah, it's been provisioned. Let us quickly look into it. So this is the step-by-step mechanism. So this is the step like where when you provision a Data Explorer pool, it automatically tells you the step number 2 is now you have to go and create a database. Let us go and create a database which says like so, and then you can specify the retention period for that. Just go ahead and create that. So once the database is created, the reason I say this, it's really straightforward. So sometimes refresh it and see it automatically went to step 3, which is around data ingestion. So this is the wizard which we opened already with a different way. So what it says is like you can go ahead and start ingesting the data. So if you can see here, it automatically opened the data explorer, and you can go ahead either creating the table, or you can go ahead and ingest the data. So if you say create table, and I'll say like a test demo table, and then pretty much you can start saying like, okay, what is your source type? And if it is a file, which is the default option that has been selected, then choose your files that you want to ingest in there. And then it will start mapping the schema between your file and the table that you have created. So if it is a new table, then pretty much it will be like a 1-to-1 of the schema, what you have got in the file will be created in the table. And then it will go ahead and ingest, load all the data that is applicable. So as you can see here, pretty much it's a straightforward. As I said, it also supports SDK, which means programmatically, if you want to ingest the data, you will be able to do that quite easily. So this wizard is one way, or you can run notebooks in order to bring ingest the data. If you require, you can go ahead and do that. And of course, once you ingest the data, you can go ahead and run your queries which is pretty much your KQL queries. And if you're not sure about it, there is a way how you can take a SQL query, just prefix that with Explain, which will convert that into a KQL query, which you can plug that in Data Explorer view, and you can run it. So this Data Explorer is actually the Data Explorer, Azure Data Explorer, the functionality of that folded inside Synapse. And of course, they, as you know, like other Synapse capabilities, like this will be enhanced in order to just take a lot of capabilities that comes as part of the integration with Synapse itself. So before I wrap up and ask for any questions, the one thing which I wanted to complete is with when do you decide between Data Explorer versus the Synapse Data Explorer pool? Make that call saying whether you want to have a one-stop shop for all your analytics. And if you already got a Synapse Analytics provision, then it's a no-brainer. So you go ahead and provision a pool for that. And same thing with this. Just around the pricing, right? Because that's another thing which always people think about, like how do I go about what is this pricing model that I get for the Data Explorer pool. So let me quickly tell you about that. So from a pricing perspective, like you need to be pausing similar to what you do with other services on the pool. So make sure the pool is not active for a long time. So the pool needs to be paused, or you can say like it has to be timing out sooner than later. So what it really means is like when you are actually creating the Data Explorer pool, set the timeout to a smaller number. Don't say like, okay, timeout after like 24 hours or something, because then it will keep on waiting until it timeouts. So just in case if you don't pause the pool or something, make sure that you set the timeout to a lower number, so it will automatically just time out. So keep that in mind. Again, the pricing for that is again going to be based on both storage as well as like how much data that you are ingesting with the Azure Data Explorer pool. Cool. So pretty much that's wraps up our session. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take any questions.